I see the recording flashing, so I think we're on. Silvia, am I right?
Yes.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, as I said, welcome everyone, and welcome to all my panelists. So what I'd like to do is I'll be introducing each of the panelists, and I'll be starting off by just asking them each a warm-up question, the same warm-up question. I'll say a couple of words about the topic that we've got. That is the procurement, the GC's office, legal ops. How are those functions going to work and thrive together? We'll have a detailed Q&A, which I think will probably go for about 30 minutes or so. And then I'd like to leave at least 15 or so minutes for Q&A from the audience at the end. And if we run out of those Q&A, I've got some backup Q&A for our panel guests. So with that, I might start and introduce. And Laura Doyle, I might start with you. Laura heads up legal procurement at NatWest, as Silvia said, formerly RBS. And my question, Laura, is why is this topic of the relationship between the General Counsel's Office, procurement and legal ops, why is it a topic worthwhile speaking about?
Sure, Jim. Thanks for the introduction. I think it is a very important topic, and I guess most people on the call will know that legal procurement tends to be a somewhat less established category of procurement compared to some other categories that businesses buy that have been professionally managed by sourcing professionals for quite some time. Legal tends to be kind of the last one to come under procurement's remit, and I think it really is only through collaboration that we are able to do that and get that foot in the door and kind of really work together to understand each other's needs, because it is a complex category. And so yeah, I really look forward to having a discussion today.
Fantastic. And that theme of collaboration is one I'm certain we're gonna expand on. Next, I'll introduce Maurus Shreyvogel. Maurus, you're of course the Chief Legal Innovation Officer at Novartis. Why is this topic of interest to you?
Well, you could say that procurement serves as the door between the resources that are at the disposal of a legal function. Like many legal functions, the Novartis legal function has, in terms of spending, 1/3 in-house and 2/3 externally. And we're in desperate need of a group of people that are helping us to coordinate and to manage that relationship, because only if the 3/3 work perfectly together, we can provide a fantastic service to the Novartis companies.
Fantastic. And some of those takeaways or those lessons are certainly what I'm hoping we'll be able to give the audience today. What are some of those strategies and those tools so that those three functions can work well together? Vince Cordo, I'll introduce you next. Vince has for a number of years been the Central Legal Operations Officer at Shell, so he'll give us an insight from the legal ops perspective, but I should say Vince has recently been promoted as Global Head of Integration and Compliance. So congrats, Vince, on that promotion. And tell the audience why this topic's of interest to you.
Well, I think partnering with your external partners is huge. So you need to make sure you engage and collaborate as real time as you can, and get your core tech in order. So to us, it's important. Everyone always talks about us being in a digital age. Well, we've always been really in a digital age with computers. It's just now data is more important, and good data is more important. So how you can make better informed decisions that impact not just economics, but other things important to your corporate values like diversity and other areas of business. So for us, it's more than just saving or getting good value for the money spent. It's also goes back to our core values and how we can track and ensure that we we are also gauging ourselves and that there's the right reciprocity in place with our partners. So to me, there's a lot of elements there that come to play. And I look forward to speaking with everybody about it today.
Fantastic, fantastic. And I look forward to hearing about how those core values basically are maximised by those three functions working together.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks, Vince. Finally, introducing Lon Povich. Now, Lon, very much from a general counsel background, I've got to say, a stellar career, being the general counsel of significant roles like the general counsel of BCG, BJ's Wholesale Club, the officer of the governor of Massachusetts too. So, Lon, fantastic of you to join us, and we're looking forward to hearing a GC perspective and a little bit about why you think this is a topic of interest.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you today and to be on the panel. And I am tasked with playing the role of the GC. So to the extent I seem a tad less collaborative, it's because I'm in the role.
It's in your nature.
No, it's in the role, less in my nature. So I would say that in both my private company GC roles or private sector GC roles, I had the advent of procurement professionals to work with at some point in my career. It didn't start that way at either place. So, I do think that it's clear that everyone is, as the other panelists said, pulling in the same direction for the best interest of the company across a lot of dimensions. And procurement really allows that to happen in an organized way. So it's an important topic for that reason. But at the same time, I think that in candor, some of the tensions are real, especially in the beginning, because it's a different way for general counsel and the general counsel team to hire lawyers than they might have been in the past. So I think that we should discuss how the tensions arise and how the tensions are alleviated, especially as people become more familiar with the process. Because I do think as it comes in, it represents a significant change.
Yeah, and Lon, I think that's a great entree really into what I want to deal with head on. What are those challenges of getting those three functions to work well together? And what are some of the strategies that each of you have developed to meet those challenges? And Laura, I might start with you. Can you identify some challenges for the audience and some strategies that you've used to deal with those challenges?
Sure, Jim. As the procurement voice on the call, I certainly can identify a few challenges that I've had over my career. So I think one of the key challenges I think of any kind of procurement professional looking to kind of break into the legal category is that fundamentally a big part of what we do is mitigating supply chain risk for the companies that we work for. I think in particular for financial services, working in a highly regulated industry, we have a lot of sort of measures that we have to take to kind of show that we've chosen the right suppliers, that we've done our kind of due diligence thoroughly, and that we're managing our contracts appropriately once they're in place. And so in order to do that, we've come up with very robust processes and procedures for all suppliers that we onboard. I think the problem with that is that it's not always necessarily relevant to the legal market. And when you're working with a supply base, that's very professional, that's generally highly regulated themselves, that have their own kind of governing bodies that are already looking for all of this stuff. It can be, I think, quite a challenge to then go into the law department and say, oh, well, you guys need to ask all of these questions that you already know the answer to, in order for me to be able to show, that I've done my job properly. So I think that's a big challenge. And then I think also, just being able to get in and use some of our sort of more procurement tools in the legal sort of market can be challenging. We're used to doing things like tendering or, even e-auctions, which can be quite controversial in this space. And, lawyers are, it's a, traditionally it's a market that's much more based on relationships and knowing people and having had past experiences and, wanting to make sure that you're getting that quality. And ultimately that you're using someone that you trust for this for this work, which can maybe seem a bit at odds with the sort of colder procurement approach of kind of tendering and blind score of a thing where we're looking at things from a more, I guess, objective approach to kind of meet the overall requirements of the company. In terms of strategies that I think kind of work to get around those challenges, I think first of all, it's really listening to stakeholders in legal and understanding, what is important to them and kind of making sure that that is getting worked into your strategy as well. Because, it's not worth it to save money on the legal advice when it's the wrong legal advice, and, you end up costing the company a lot more money because they've not gotten the right advice, or a deal's fallen through, or, that sort of a thing. So you really have to understand what the outcome is of what you're buying, I think, before you can sort of just go in and try and blindly slash the costs, or, try to move to a lower cost provider. But you can only get to, I think, the heart of what the legal department values by sitting down and asking them and kind of, demonstrating that you're aware that they'll have those types of concerns, and you just want to kind of find out what they are. I think also being willing to adapt procurement processes where you can, and where it kind of doesn't necessarily increase the risk profile to your organization, I think is important. A lot of what I've done is having to explain to other procurement people kind of why we won't do that in legal, or why we'll do it slightly differently, but actually it meets the same requirement. And just, getting them to agree that actually it's still a robust process, but it kind of doesn't annoy either our legal department or our suppliers as much as kind of just the straightforward process would do. And I think finally just starting small to prove that you can add value, and then building up the relationship from there. You're never going to be able to just walk in the door and get all over the biggest matter that's happening in the company. I think you need to go in and find some sort of low-hanging fruit that you can kind of get in, demonstrate those tools, show to legal that they can work and that they can add value and that they're worth doing, before you then try and target the bigger stuff.
Laura, that's fantastic, but I'm conscious that you've got 10 plus years experience, and so you've done the hard yards. For those members of the audience that are listening that perhaps don't quite have that level of credibility in procurement, and that are in the earlier years of their career, is it really the last, or it's probably 2 or 3 of those, still the listening, perhaps the smaller steps? Anything else that you can be suggesting to those members of the audience?
I think listening probably is the biggest one, because I think the minute that you show up, to speak to a general counsel or a legal operations officer and kind of say, right, I need to cut 20% off your budget, how are we going to do that? That you've already lost them at that point. I think it really needs to be going in and kind of say, right, here's what I'm targeted against, but what I want to understand is what's important to you, and kind of where can we find the middle ground, so we can both meet our objectives.
Fantastic. Maurus, what about from your perspective? What are some of the challenges and that you'd like to highlight, and some of the strategies that you've adopted to beat those challenges away?
Sure. And I want to the challenge that I prepared is very simple. I think we need to find a way for the in-house legal function, procurement, and the outside counsel to work together in a meaningful way. Yep. And if I'm being very honest, the challenge that we're facing is that we've done it the wrong way for the better part of the last 10 years. We've applied the procurement principles from other categories to legal, and we didn't prepare our legal professionals to face that change properly. So probably the first 5-6 years in our journey, it was a constant fight to find ways to engage outside counsel without being bothered by procurement professionals. And that's a pretty bad starting point if you want to start driving value with this triangle of resources that you have at your disposal. And the way we've went about probably 3 years ago is to completely rethink, first of all, within the legal function, how do we want to deliver legal services? We've went through an entire activity analysis in order to determine what do we want to do by ourselves, what do we want to stop doing, a very important point, and where actually do we need support from outside counsel, and how should this support look like. We've used that point in time to reintroduce our procurement team to the legal function and have our procurement team play an integral role in establishing our new outside counsel program, and the processes and technologies that we introduced to the legal function and outside counsel to enable all of those. Now it's about continuing driving the change and sticking with our attorneys to continue explaining to them why how we deliver legal work is equally as important as the delivery as such, and going through this learning experience for all members involved so that we can learn together. Ultimately, it's pretty simple. It's meeting in the middle. It's taking the elements that procurement has developed with so many other functions and take whatever we can use, we can understand, and we can leverage at our point in the functional majority curve, instead of just trying to take over what everybody else is using as well. To Vince's point, data is huge. We've ignored data for a very, very long time, and it is with us a mixture between procurement and legal operations that is providing these data points that lets us make smarter buying decisions, and that explain or provides objective data for us to better understand the relationship with outside counsel. And finally, at the end of the day, we no longer distinguish between procurement and legal operations. That includes a lot of support that we from the legal function provide to our procurement colleagues so that they're being considered and seen as a successful contributor within the procurement organization, so that they can sell the success stories that might look different to the success stories of other categories. And since we were able to come together as, I want to use the term, the cheesy term of a kind of the one family, we're helping in the middle of the relationship between inside and outside counsel.
And Maurus, because I know that victories are few and far between, that procurement can show its group what it's achieved in legal, it must be a great kind of almost like a feather in the cap, albeit it might feel like a small achievement or small victory, because they are sometimes hard fought and hard to come by. I expect that must do wonders for morale, both for the procurement team, the integrated procurement and legal ops team within Novartis when those successes start coming through. Is that a fair comment?
It's a fair comment, and it's a very important investment.
Yep.
The better we do in this relationship, the more resources we will need. So selling these successes at the end of the day is the input for us to being awarded with even more procurement resources that we will need in the near future.
And something that you said that I'm sure the audience will want to hear a bit more about. I mean, it took you a while to actually, years in fact, to get to the point that you're at right now and the success that you're achieving. if you could save the audience some years, some of your early years, what would you tell them? What is the don't do, or that can save them some time early in their own journeys?
And I'm just, I'm just telling the mistakes that we've made that probably nobody else will make. But for a very long time, we've taken the position that transparency is bad for us.
Yeah.
And procurement provides transparency, and transparency is bad for us. So try to find ways to work around procurement. Embracing these additional resources and their subject matter expertise is what I would recommend for everybody to do, and maybe not even wait until it's offered, but pull it in and be very directive or co-design the processes that you want your procurement function to do for you. At the end of the day, savings are a collateral benefit from the work that you do that delivers superior legal outcome.
Yep. And that sounds like almost a bit of a mind shift for procurement, where often, and perhaps Laura will confirm this, that savings is the first criteria by which the procurement officer is assessed. So anyway, we'll come back to that. Maurus, thank you. That's really useful. Vince, I might pass on to you and get your thoughts about some of the challenges you found and some of the strategies that you've adopted, certainly in your role as the Central Legal Operations Officer at Shell.
Yeah, well, back in that role, one of the things we looked at first coming in-house from the firm side was, I must admit, I was naive at first, thinking that saving 10% or a certain value was the initial driver. And I think I should first throw out there, and this is where partnering with CP and other functions, CP will agree, is that it's about, first and foremost, how are you treating your shareholders and how are you making money for your shareholders? That's number one. It's not about saving money first. That's not what you lead in with. It's first, did I get good advice? As both of the my colleagues online here have said, you don't want to get the wrong advice that costs you money, or that puts your brand in jeopardy, or that does that sets you down a path where you'll spend more money. So it's quality of service that's important. But number two, sometimes you spend a little bit more to get a faster resolution, so you can, again, generate more revenue. So I would say cutting budget, it's always a discussion, but it's all of our responsibilities to work with our colleagues in CP and in finance, however your organization's structured, even internally within your own management streams in legal or in the business. It's first, what are you doing smart for your shareholders that, number one, has them in mind with making money, that's safe, that's got all of your core values in mind, obviously. And then if you save money during that process, great, good for you, because that's part of just doing a good bit of work. Now, to do all that, you need, we use a system to do that. We couldn't, having conversations great, but when you're a large organization, it's not just how large is your legal department, but when you're a large organization, how do you interact and engage with your customers as well? So we needed also a way to reach everyone. And frankly, so did CP. Contract procurement usually has a lot more resourcing than legal, for example. And they have people actually, in some cases, on the ground in some of your locations, far off in different parts of the planet. How do you work together to say, A, we could work together with pressing the flesh, with being in certain regions and locations, but B, how are we making one another aware when we're working on things that we should be aware of, that we could leverage in other conversations? So if we're doing a deal in Asia, how maybe that counsel or that partner can also do something similar with someone in the Big Four that needs to work on a tax matter in the States. And how do we partner with them together? Because that value of them connecting and learning about Shell is enormous. So,
Yeah.
so that was something I wouldn't say it's a challenge because people didn't want to do it. It was a challenge because to do that, immediately people assume, how's that possible? It sounds like it's going to take a long time to do that. What can we achieve now? We're in a now society, but sometimes you have to go slow to go fast, as one of our EVPs say on the business side. And I, for one, think it's essential to do that kind of thinking versus just staying focused on one element. There's lots of elements there. Now, as far as the other bit is when you're looking at your internal team too, resourcing before you just go out and use your panel. How are you using your internal team? And as Maurus said earlier, should you be even doing the work internally? Should it go all externally? Or should you not even go externally and should you do it internally? How do you determine that? Right? And the days of in the past where people would say, well, I just know I've done this for 30 years. I just know my team can do X, Y, Z. That's not good enough anymore. It goes back to your customer, right? Are customers happy with just hearing, hey, I've done it for 30 years. I just know. Not anymore. They want to prove it. Okay, how do you know? How do you know that you don't have a resource in another part of the plant that not only can do it cheaper, because it's not about cheaper, but that's available now and that can do it better because they know your business. So how are you learning and cultivating this information? So it goes back to core technologies, right? Your RFP systems, your matter management systems, things like that, where how are you doing that so that you're managing yourself? And I'll pause here because I'll say legal, I think, is doing an exceptional job in the industry and all of our companies, getting better at peeling the layers of the onion. The consulting streams like the Big Four, they're still doing block day type situations. They can't really layer it out the way legal is. So I think there's an advantage to the way legal is behaving. And I think CP is seeing that. And I'm sensing that also what CP is learning from the legal side. In our case, we're doing both together. They're taking that to the table with the Big Four and saying, well, here, we also want you to operate this way. So I'll just stop there because I do think that oftentimes we tend to, in the legal sphere, beat ourselves up a little bit and not relish in the successes. And I think there is a lot of successes that have that the industry has done. And I think it's time to also take note how those other, because going back to CP, why CP is, we're all responsible for our organizations when we do spend to make change, right? And if we could also say, hey, well, here's how we're doing diversity with our spend and how are they doing it in the Big Four, why not tackle it together? And I think as we start doing that stuff and learning on these items, we're going to continue to make a dent. So yeah, that's an overarching view without being redundant to what my peers said online.
Thanks for that perspective, and I'm sure if there are any law firms listening out there, they might be pleased at knowing the Big Four are actually behind them, well behind them, certainly in some respects. Lon, that sometimes the GC door, which is sometimes a little difficult to open or a little difficult to communicate with, tell us some of the challenges that while you've been sitting in that office that you've experienced and how you've dealt with those challenges and bringing the procurement department along or the legal ops function along on whatever journey you're on at that particular point in time or those points in time.
Well, I think the panel made great points, great suggestions, and there's a risk of repeating those suggestions, but I'll just taking those into what I'm saying. I think it is a journey, and I think it is about relationships, and journeys on dealing with relationships takes time. And I think that legal professionals by their nature in many cases, and procurement professionals by their nature in many cases, have a harder outside shells, harder edges. I mean, both those business, either it's a negotiation or it's controversy or litigation, or somebody's trying to win and someone's trying to lose and someone's trying to get the best deal from a supplier and the like. And I think it's important that all the parties on the company side realize, one, as people have said, they all have an obligation to provide the client service that's necessary and to get the best outcome on a monetary side. But in order to do that, everyone has to sort of get a little softer on the outside in dealing with their colleagues and be willing to take data in, to learn from the data that's provided as part of the procurement process, to understand what getting good legal service means. I think the GC starts with, I want to hire someone I know who's done it before. I'm not less concerned with what it costs, because if they get it wrong, it'll cost me a lot more.
Yep.
And procurement probably has a different point of view on that. So I think they have to, both functions work best when they educate each other about what they think and why they think it, and have the softer edge inside the company to get it done in a way that makes sense. I mean, I was general counsel Boston Consulting Group when procurement started for consulting firms. Honestly, when I started, we were one of the biggest consulting firms in the world. We did most of our work on letters that seldom extended more than 3 pages and had no legal terms attached.
Yeah.
That was great.
That were the good old days.
Oh, that was awesome. But then procurement started, and while it, from the outside point, seemed a little annoying, and I'm sure law firms have thought that from the outside in the beginning, the rigor that it imposed on our method of explaining what we could do benefited both us and the customers. And I think on the inside, when you're dealing with procurement and the general counsel's office, the rigor that people have to go through, especially with a softer edge on the same teams, can get the company to the best place, as my colleagues have said.
Yeah. Well, clearly some of the themes, and certainly one theme that I'm hearing across all of the panelists is collaboration. There's got to be some level, whether it's a softening of the outside, includes the softening of the outside shells, the strategies we're adopting. We need to find ways in order to better either start or continue on the collaboration process, because albeit some of the objectives might be different, there's, as Maurus talks about, there's the overlap that we've got to find. Again, for the benefit of the audience, can we identify, are there any particular tools or processes or strategies that will help in that collaboration objective, whether it's just fostering a more collaborative environment, or whether it's actually delivering on a collaboration platform of some kind? Is there anything that we can provide the audience as takeaways, as potential, as I said, tools or strategies or processes?
Jim, can I give a funny example real quick? Is it okay?
Yep.
All right. Years ago, before the iPhone came out, I'm dating myself a bit, but when the BlackBerry was out, and I was thinking, as the phone was coming, I was at a firm. I was watching it being distributed throughout the firm, and I thought for sure it was the end of some of the legacy partners in the organization. And within a month, as these phones were rolled out, I saw how once these partners got the phone and device, they were more accessible than ever. And what I thought, I had them pegged wrong. I thought that was just going to change them, and it was going to go all to the new generation. But what I learned that point, I would say, is relevant to the question you're asking now, is a rainmaker at a firm is a rainmaker in any type of technology. And they want to self-serve, they want to be available to their clients, and they want to work. That's what got them there. And they want to be available to give advice and to partner with who they work for. So I'll say, with the solutions, to answer the question on the solution, is what solutions give those types of behaviors to the rainmaker internally in an organization and at a firm, if it's 8 o'clock, and I know about mindfulness and about when people work, etc., but certain times there's an emergency, and what gives them the ability to get in touch with their partner fast, so that if, for instance, the person in CP is on holiday, or it's after hours and they don't want to bother them, or if their legal officers on another matter, they need to be able to self-serve to a degree. Now, they will all agree they still want to be compliant, they still want to be aligned to their agreements. Of course, that's all the case, right? So how does that tool also enabled to work with them to still track and ensure that everything is on par with the agreement. So to me, I just thought I'd give that little example, because you don't want to have a rigor on process that hinders the natural way the client-attorney relationship works, right? And I view all the tools that we put in our core, again, and now being on the business side, it's still relevant there as we do decisions. In fact, more so when the business makes decisions, how do the lawyers know what's going on? So you want that kind of awareness. So to me, before diving into the tool question, I would say it's imperative that that's, checkbox one is
Yep.
what is not going to hinder the real-time connect points. And when I say real-time according to, we're all professionals here, right? If somebody sends an email at 3 in the morning, it shouldn't just be because they want to give somebody work, right? If it's an emergency, it's an emergency. But that's it. But we want real-time experience, so that if we need support because of emergencies, or if we need regular connections, it's there.
Great example, great comment. And I'll come back to say, okay, what is it? How do you actually get there for the benefit of the audience? What are the tools that you're using there? But before I ask that, Laura or Maurus, any thoughts on specific strategies or tools that the audience might be interested in that you guys have used?
I think what can be really useful at this sort of start of a relationship is actually sitting down and looking at sort of what the roles and responsibilities are.
Yep.
So that's a document that we've got for our department as procurement, in terms of, what would we normally expect to do, and kind of what do we expect our kind of stakeholders in the various businesses to do. But what I did with my stakeholders quite early on was just kind of sit down with that document and say, right, kind of here's what I would usually do, and here's what you would usually do, but kind of what elements of that kind of do and don't work for you, so that we could almost agree our sort of own bespoke roles and responsibilities. So, like, for example, for my stakeholders, maintaining the relationships with the law firms themselves is really important to them, and that means that they want to be the ones that send out communications when we're about to go out to tender, or when we've made decisions about who's going to be on our panel. Normally that would be a procurement job for us in the bank, but it doesn't bother me at all, or impact me, that they want to send those out, from the general counsel, and kind of make sure that they're keeping those relationships close to their chest. And even just making a really small concession like that, I think, goes a long way for the strength of the relationship.
Just a minor point,
Yep.
and maybe that's rather a what not to do.
Yep.
Again, from my large list of mistakes that we've made on our journey, the first iteration of our panel firm program was very directive. The global legal leadership team established a list of firms to be used. The consequence of that and very stringent rules was that many of our legal professionals no longer bothered to consider whom to use, but they just picked from the list in order to be compliant, as Vince said before. We had, again, took us quite some time to undo this behavior of, you can't go wrong if you choose from the list, to you're responsible for that specific outcome of a matter, and selecting outside counsel is an important part of it. And this is exactly where self-serve tools or partial self-serve tools became a very important component for us to swinging this around.
So that theme of self-service, but in a way which doesn't change, I suppose, in expectations of delivery and timing and service, is certainly coming through.
I think a big part of that, Jim, when it comes to self-service, though, is also to ensure that we're not showcasing bias with the self-service. So panel is obviously not a panel of one.
Yep.
There's a panel of many, and you know, there's so when you do this collaborative approach and you do these items where you're reaching out amongst others, it's not just bias on, hey, I've worked at this firm or I'd like to go here. It's also, you know, what are other divisions in your organization doing, and could those potentially be mapped together? And I know this is a challenge not just in legal but on CP as well. How for example, how can you possibly track all of this quickly to take advantage, and that requires a good toolkit to help that process along. You know, we need to make sure that we are constantly challenging ourselves to say, you know, is it sensible, not just for the deal, for example, but we've worked with this firm for X amount of years, let's say 10 years. Wouldn't it make sense to be safe and ensure that other firms know the business as well for that particular work, so you're not wed to that firm indefinitely, and so you've spread out your risk a bit. It's just those are things we need to constantly do to make sure that we're doing the best what we can for our customers.
Great. Now, I'm conscious we've got 10 minutes before the top of the hour. I do want to leave a few minutes for Q&A, but before I ask Silvia whether we've got any from the audience, I might just ask the panel any kind of final or closing or comments or points that you've thought of before but you haven't quite made yet to close out our discussion before we go to the Q&A. Lon, nothing else?
No, I think the word we probably heard the most throughout all the comments was the word relationship.
Yep.
So relationships take time, relationships take tending, relationships evolve, and I think those are that's sort of the theme that crosses no matter what organization you're in. You have to deal with the relationships.
Fantastic. Silvia, I might just ask if you can just moderate. I think we do have a couple of Q&As. I think I can probably see them.
Yes, and we do. And I already asked to unmute Cameron. You had two comments. Would you like to speak up, Cameron?
Yeah, they're pretty much one and the same comment, and it relates to.
This is Cameron Smith from Novartis.
Oh, sorry, Cameron Smith, Novartis, head of professional services procurement. It's more of a statement to the comments that Maurus was making, and I do like to publicly apologise for giving Maurus some grief and some grey hair in the process. But what we've done in the last 12 months, I think, has been. I wouldn't say groundbreaking, but we've developed a relationship that is mutually beneficial. We've understood each other a lot more. We've overcome hurdles. We're getting better quality data, better quality processes. And in a time when some organisations are looking to downsize their teams, we're actually seeing the investment from tools like PERSUIT and this enhanced joint relationship as being one where we can actually go and ask for greater levels of resource, which we're doing at the moment. So it's all positive, and I think Maurus's comments are spot on.
Well, Cameron, thank you very much for that. And it is good to see actually the rather than talking about cutting resources, being able to add resources because of success. So that's a great story.
Yeah. The other point that I could just follow up on is that. Savings, I've made the comment, savings are a byproduct of a good relationship with legal. Maurus and I very rarely sit down with each other and talk about savings, because we know that the targets that we go for are achievable, that the methodology of accounting for those savings is fair and reasonable, and the tools that we have and the people we have in place and the relationship we've got makes those targets very accessible. Now, I'd like to see that continue. I don't know whether that will, but That's one of the feelings I've got from having a good relationship, a good working relationship, and some good people co-located with legal.
And Cameron, that sounds like really trusting the process too, that if the process is right, it will deliver the outcomes in terms of savings and so forth. If you've got those in place and the right people, the right processes, the usual stuff. But it sounds like it's exactly what you're talking about. It ends up being a byproduct of getting the other things right.
Correct. Yep.
That's fantastic.
And our next question is from Matt Prinn, RFP Advisory.
Hey, thanks, Silvia. I was just curious if there was any feedback from the panel on what the biggest complaints are from the legal department to procurement about the RFP process as a whole. Are there certain things that are, commonly noted as, complaints or areas that they want to improve? Or just curious if there was anything specific to the RFP process that procurement and the legal team have issues with.
I guess I don't want to speak over anyone. I'm happy to go.
Yeah, why don't you go?
The biggest complaint I would say is, well, number one is, as stated earlier, there's a combination now of the system matter experts in legal, and then there's the contracts procurement folks as well. So number one, we deal with it regardless of who's doing it. I would just want to throw out there, doesn't matter who does it in CP or if it's in your legal department doing it. It's how do you keep it simple so that somebody could still also maintain their relationship when speaking with the firm. Firm's feedback is how do we get feedback on these RFPs? Why weren't we invited? Why aren't we like why did you pick so and so? I would have beat that price, or I would have done this. So the biggest feedback there is how do you get a collaboration, and that's why we use the tool. We use PERSUIT, to help us with this process. But number two, you still got to make sure you're partnering with your firms and being clear and upfront with them as to why they were picked, why they weren't, et cetera. So even with or without, you need to be able to give them evidence, and tools like that actually help firms, frankly, so that firms can get more clarity on saying, so here's some data points for us. So the biggest feedback is, I spent all this time on an RFP, or, hey, I haven't even given the opportunity to spend this time on RFP. How do I get invited more? What do I need to do? So I would say, if you look at it from a positive, tools feedback, give them more evidence to change, right? But the negatives are, we want to get invited more. What's the deal? How can we not get invited more? Number two, when we are invited, how do you make it simple? And for us, we try to make it simple by using the tool and the structure and what they need to do proper pricing. I will say, though, the thing that hasn't changed in at least the 20 years I've been doing this is sometimes a client can't tell you everything until you're part of the matter. So that's always going to be an issue. So let's not kid ourselves. That's not going to go away with anything. Sometimes you have to be vague until you get further down the process. But I would say a firm can also help themselves more by just engaging and learning the team. It's not just also about the lawyers. Who supports the lawyers? Who are the allied professionals that supports the lawyers? Because lawyers change and they get promoted and they become GCs and they become so how do you always keep your footprint where that doesn't throw another block in you? So that's my my quick response, but pass on to
and just to echo that a little, to take the time to give the firms the feedback may seem like time you're not sure you want to spend on someone who didn't get the bid, but honestly it will improve their bids in the future, both for you and for other people. So it's not an investment that goes solely to them of your time. It's an investment that comes back to you, the company.
So we're almost running out of time, but Richard Brzakala from CIBC in Toronto, you had a question.
Hey guys, thanks. Great panel, Silvia, Jim, good moderating. Quick question. So how do you guys think COVID is going to change the dynamics of relationships going forward? I know you guys talked a lot about it. Do you expect that there will be less reliance on relationship focus and more emphasis amongst corporate clients to kind of chase the lowest cost providers? I mean, we're seeing a lot of stuff changing. legal work's becoming more commoditized because AI tools, labor arbitrage is changing as well. What are your thoughts on that?
I'd love to chip in and just give a couple of thoughts on that. One, less time on the golf course. Two, less time in restaurants. It certainly feels like a lot of the time, which was, I'm certainly not suggesting it was wasted time, but a lot of the time that was spent in the in-person relationship building is certainly not going to be there this year. It might come back next year. And I always think about, what does that actually then mean if you've had less time doing a lot of that softer relationship building? I've certainly asked the question, but I'd love to hear from the panel what they think that might mean, certainly for this year and maybe next year.
Just, I can just look back to see how our buying behavior changed over the last couple of months. And we've introduced the PERSUIT platform just before the COVID situation happened, and we are ahead of where we believed we could be after this period of time, because this is filling a gap that we would have if we didn't have a platform to support the communication between our lawyers and the firms. And also there is a lot of energy from our lawyers that we missed earlier on to help us improve the templates, the processes around PERSUIT, because to some extent we are flying blind, and we need these tools in order to achieve the same. And to the question before, the one thing that most of our lawyers are positively surprised is that an RFP, if done online, is surprisingly fast. That's the one thing that most people said we will not, or if we can, we'd like to avoid using an RFP process because it just takes too long. And in this online world, we can do those processes within days.
Thanks,
Maurus. Silvia, I'm conscious we're a couple of minutes.
Yes, and thank you all so much. I mean, this has been a fantastic discussion. So thank you all, my dear panelists, for your time, and my dear moderator, and thank you audience for staying on with us. Almost everyone is still on. So thank you very much. We will thank you for your great insights. I hope you enjoyed this session. I guess you did. If you have additional questions for any of our panelists, please find them on LinkedIn, connect with them directly, and or send us an email. We're happy to send them to the group. Join us again on the 2nd of September. This will be a similar discussion on a slightly different topic. We will discuss some of the findings from the 2020 intelligence report. And again, I promise you it will be just as fun and just as insightful as this round. So have a lovely morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And good night, Jim. He's in Australia, so it's, what did you say, 3 o'clock in the morning, so go to bed, Jim. Thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Silvia. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
discussion.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Stay
Bye-bye.
safe.